My name is Ken Arscott. I'm your narrator for the SGM Active Shooters Defense training video. If you're unable to get out of the building, the next step is hiding. There are several techniques that you can use to hide. First, try to go to the nearest location that you previously rehearsed and one that has the most bullet-resistant protection. If you didn't rehearse, then find a location quickly that will protect you from being shot. If you're trapped and can't exit the building, think about the rehearsals that you did. Because hiding is now your best option. Look around for something to hide behind. Anything solid that will protect you from bullets. The best hiding location is a room, preferably a room that you can lock. Try to take some people with you. Close and lock the door, then start barricading the door with anything that will help keep it shut and that can resist bullets. Turn the lights off. If there's a desk, don't just slide it or hide behind it. Tip it over for even more protection. While you're creating a barricade, stay low. Most active shooters who encounter a locked room, they may try to open it, but they usually don't waste a lot of time trying to force it open. They just start looking for other easier targets. While talking about taking people into a room, a word of caution. It's not a good idea for a lot of people to gather in one room, because in the event that the shooter is able to get into that room, he now has several victims clustered together. There are two types of cover, soft cover and hard cover. Soft cover is an object that hides you from sight but does not have sufficient strength to protect you from bullets. An example would be drapes, inside an office cubicle, etc. Soft cover is not ideal, but if that's all you have, it's better than nothing. Hard cover not only hides you from sight, but it actually is usually strong enough to protect you from bullets. Barricade the door with heavy objects such as tables, chairs, furniture, file cabinets, computers, photocopiers, anything heavy enough that you could use to barricade the door and hide behind. If there are windows, pull down the shades or close the drapes and make the room as dark as possible. If there's a doorstop and the door faces in, use it to jam the threshold. If you need to improvise, use things like your wallet, folded magazines, or anything else that could be used to jam the threshold. Before you call 911, tell everyone to remain silent and turn off their cell phones immediately. In most jurisdictions, you can text 911. If not, you'll have to dial 911. Be sure that you're far enough away from the door and speak in a whisper, cupping your hands over the phone's microphone. Have everyone spread out and remain flat on the floor behind however many items are available. It's not recommended that you break your cover unless there's no other alternative. It gives the active shooter a second chance to shoot you. Only exit the room when you're absolutely certain that law enforcement officers have taken control. When you come out, follow the police officer's instructions to the letter. Most of all, never rush towards the police, because they're pumped up, they're aggressive, and sometimes unpredictable based on past experience, or they have no idea if you're a victim or another shooter. A lot of people have survived by pretending to be dead, hoping that the shooter will pass them by. That may work, but the key is to make yourself look authentic. You have to look lifeless, so don't close your eyes and scrunch them. Close your eyelids naturally. It's better to close your eyelids just enough so that you can still see shadows. As you're running away, leave a trail of obstacles behind to help deter the shooter. If there are glass objects around, smash them to the ground. There are conflicting recommendations regarding pulling a fire alarm. The first one is that when you pull the alarm, the noise from the alarm will be confusing and disrupt the shooter, making it almost impossible for him to listen for movements of other victims. The opposing recommendation is to not pull the fire alarm because it will cause everyone in the building who was unaware of the active shooter will then start evacuating and exposing themselves to the shooter. If you're in a safe location and have time to set off the sprinkler system, do it. Use a cigarette lighter or a match or anything needed to set that sprinkler off. The downpour from the sprinklers will disrupt the shooter's vision. The floors will become slippery, slowing down the shooter's movement and vision. The active shooter will then be facing a new set of issues, and all of them are going to be working against him. He now has to walk around chairs, tables, and other debris that you scattered around, like that broken glass. There are computers, printers, wet floors, all sorts of things. All of that delays his timetable and gives the police time to arrive and take over. While you're running, look for items that could be used and improvised as weapons. Table legs. Turn tables upside down and kick the legs off. Those can be used as a club. Fire extinguisher. Not just for the spray part, but as a battering ram modified weapon. Fire extinguishers are located throughout most businesses. They're usually behind a glass door. Fire extinguisher agents are either a dry chemical or a foam. When activated, the dry chemical extinguisher puts out a large cloud. The foam extinguisher delivers wet chemical foam, both of which are blinding. Coat racks and office flagpoles can be used as a club, and the base can be used as a battering ram. Computers, TVs, and other office equipment. Breaking them into pieces that could be used as sharp instrument weapons. Scissors, staplers, rulers, hole punches, sharp pencils. Computer cables, electrical cords, and telephone wires. They could all be used to tie doors closes or tie doorknobs to furniture to help secure out-opening doors. If you have a backpack, fill it with books, reams of paper, or anything. Put it on backwards, making it into a makeshift bulletproof vest. If you don't have a backpack, stuff books or reams of paper under your shirt to act as a bulletproof vest. Bullets may still be able to pierce it, but it would still deflect them so that you could just get wounded instead of being killed. The janitor maintenance room has many items that could be used as makeshift weapons. They almost always have bleach and other cleaning liquids that can be used to help blind the shooter. There are also mops and broom handles. One technique would be to take a mop and soak it in the bleach. If you get the opportunity, push the mop into the attacker's face, blinding them. Most likely, he will grab at his eyes and may even drop his weapon. Grab that weapon immediately, then you and the others can swamp attack him until he's neutralized. What if there's no place to run or hide? Remember what I said about freezing? So, fighting now becomes the difference between life and death. You're facing a mentally unbalanced and fanatic person whose sole purpose is to kill as many people as he can. The time between running or hiding and choosing to fight is just a split second. If you're able to escape, that might be your best option. There's no shame in that. If, however, you decide that you want to take action, consider your situation. You'll need to process a lot of information, such as what kind of weapon does the shooter have? Is it a long barrel, a handgun, or both? Is he wearing body armor? What is his demeanor? Is he firing haphazardly? Is he wasting ammunition, or is he more calculated? Is he picking out certain people to shoot, or is he just shooting at anyone within his 10-2 zone? What if you're in a room with others? I mean, where the door opens outwards, has no lock, and there's nothing heavy enough to make a barricade. Obviously, that's a problem. As soon as the shooter steps over the threshold, pick up that fire extinguisher because now's the time to use it. Spray the shooter in the face, creating a smoke screen and blinding him. Immediately hit him in the head with the fire extinguisher again and again and again until he's down and neutralized. Then you need to yell for someone else to help and swamp him so that he can't move or shoot. Disarm him and hold him down until the police arrive. If you don't have a makeshift weapon, when he crosses that threshold, kick him as hard as you can on the side of his knee to break it. Once he's down, swarm around him and neutralize him. Here are some of the defensive techniques that you should consider. When you attack, go barbaric. In other words, once you attack, don't let up. Use the heel of your hand or a makeshift weapon to strike him on the back of his neck just below the head. This is the cervical vertebrae. This can cause instant paralyzation or at least the maximum injury. Fold your fingers into a spearhead and strike him in the throat as hard as possible. This can also be accomplished by using a makeshift weapon such as a broom or mop handle. And of course, the old reliable fire extinguisher. Try to avoid having to wrestle with him, but if you do have to wrestle and you have no weapon, yell for someone to help you. Then go ballistic. Gouge his eyes out with your thumbs. If he can't see you, he can't shoot you. Break his fingers. Break his fingers so that he can't fire the weapon. Bite his ears. Do whatever it takes to take control. Swarming works best in an enclosed location such as a lobby or office area. This can be done by a group of potential victims all rushing the shooter at the same time. The shooter won't be able to attack multiple people rushing him from all sides and striking him with makeshift weapons. When you're outside that 10-2 zone, quickly and quietly tackle them low, knocking them down and yell for help. Do not release him no matter what. When they show up, have them help you to disarm him. Tell them to help hold him down. Most active shooters carry more than one weapon, so you're going to want to keep him pinned down so that they cannot obtain any additional weapons. Only search for additional weapons if you have more than one person assisting you. As soon as you start searching him, you've lost control, and that could be fatal. If the shooter does not have you in his 12 o'clock zone, run directly at him and bear hug him around his arms and do not let go. Do not let go no matter what. If you can't get your arms around them, yell for someone to help you. Once he's in the bear hug and on the ground, he probably won't be able to fire his weapon and probably won't even be able to aim it. Yell for someone to disarm him because you don't want to let loose of that bear hug. Keep them like this until the police arrive. Now let's talk about some real weapons that many security officers are issued. If you're equipped with pepper spray or mace, use the stream or foam types. Foam is more accurate, but the streams will go further. Avoid using the fog technique because the blowback could work against you. If you have a baton, it can be used for several defensive tactics. It can be used to poke in the shooter's face, chest, and lower body extremities. It can be used to strike the shooter. The best locations to strike him is wherever the skin is closest to the bone. The chin, the hands, the elbows, and the head. In your baton training, you were told not to hit anyone in the head. In an active shooter situation, forget all of that. Hit him in the head or anywhere else to neutralize him. You have to remember that you're dealing with a madman who's trying to kill everybody. Here's another baton technique that you were told not to do. If you're able to get behind the shooter, Quickly place one arm over his shoulder. Bring the baton under his neck and then put your end of the baton in the crook of your other arm, then tightening it by bringing your arm up. Then take your hand and put it behind his head and push forward, downward, and then at the same time pull the baton backwards, choking him. Tell him to drop his weapon. If he complies, you can ease up just a little bit on the pressure so that he can breathe, but don't release your hold. If he does not drop the weapon, keep the pressure up until he passes out, is disarmed, and secured, or if he's unconscious and neutralized. Security officers can be armed or unarmed. The active shooter defensive techniques are different for each. Let's start with the armed security officer. Those officers have had classroom firearm training, have qualified on a pistol range, licensed, and are qualified to carry it when on duty. A firearm is not a decoration, nor is it a toy. It's a lethal weapon, and it's carried for a reason. It should only be used in a life-threatening situation, and only if there's no other alternative. Here are some rules of thumb strategies that you can practice that will be very helpful if you're ever faced with an active shooter. Learn when to draw your weapon. In an active shooter situation, that means immediately. Understand that as soon as you draw your weapon, you attract attention. Not only will the shooter see you, but so will everyone else around you. The last thing that you want is to be mistaken as the shooter should things start falling apart. So yell loudly and clearly, "Security officer, drop your weapon." This will let everyone around you know that you're the good guy. And that'll put your shooter on notice that he now has a problem. Unless there's no other choice, never, never, never try to disarm an active shooter when you're at his 12 o'clock zone. But if you have no other choice, while rushing him, zigzag and move up and down as you close the gap. It's best to come in from either side of his 12 zone. When you get close enough, grab the barrel and push it to the side. At the same time, karate chop his wrist downwards with your hand. Then, using both hands, twist the weapon upwards towards the shooter. You should then be able to pull the weapon away from him. Once you get possession of the weapon, turn it on the shooter. If he continues to resist or goes for another weapon, shoot him until he's neutralized. If you're unable to turn the weapon around, use the butt of the weapon to smash his face, knocking him back. Tell him to get on his knees and put his hands behind his head. Then tell him to lay flat on the floor with his arms stretched out, fingers open, palms down. If there are other victims present, have them immediately search and remove any other weapons. Keep the weapon trained on the shooter until the police arrive. Use of the following tactic is used when the shooter is able to open the door and is starting to come in, or they're coming down a hallway. Starting with the door, position yourself to the side of the door closest to the doorknob. If it's a hallway, position yourself behind the corner of the aisle as he's coming down. When you see the barrel of the gun, that's when he's most vulnerable. Now that you have yourself positioned behind the corner of a hallway, or if it's a door and you're standing out of sight close to the edge of the opening, when the shooter enters, he'll be holding the weapon in front of him. As he steps up to the threshold, grab the weapon by the barrel with your left hand, and at the same time, come down in a karate chop at the wrist holding the weapon. As soon as you hit his wrist, twist that hand that's holding the weapon, and with both hands, disarm him. Then turn the weapon on the shooter. If it's a long gun, you may not have time to turn the gun on him. In that case, drive the butt of the weapon into his face and then turn it on him. As I mentioned earlier, most active shooters carry more than one weapon. So keep his weapon trained on him if possible, and have someone remove all of the other weapons. If he makes an aggressive move, shoot him until he's neutralized. This tactic works whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Each step should be done simultaneously. Try to get yourself into the shooter's 9 o'clock or 2 o'clock zone. Then move in quickly and decisively. Push and grab the weapon's receiver with your left hand and deflect it away from you. Now, immediately follow with your right hand with a powerful downward karate chop onto his wrist, chopping his hand, and at the same time, twist the gun. As soon as your right hand strikes his wrist, bring your elbow up and deliver a full-powered elbow strike to his face, and immediately grab the weapon so that you have two hands controlling it. Then pivot sharply 180 degrees to your left to rip the weapon from his grip. Once you have the weapon, quickly turn it around, pointing the muzzle at him. You're not at the pistol range competing for a high score. A lot of security officers that carry a firearm are certain that they would be able to use it if an active shooter situation occurred. The truth is, it's easier said than done. Whether they'll be able to use their weapon proficiently while under stress is another matter. Unfortunately, sometimes a security officer will freeze. If that happens, remember what I said earlier about freezing. The shooter is not a paper target. He can see you and hear you, and he wants to kill you. As I mentioned in the beginning of this training video, hundreds of people have been murdered, and almost every shooter fired multiple times. If you carry extra cartridges, I highly recommend that when off-duty, safely practice changing cartridges to be more comfortable with the process. That way, if you're under pressure, you won't be fumbling changing the magazines. If you hit him and he falls to the floor, you won't know if he's dead, unconscious, or faking it. Order him to put his hands over his head. If he doesn't respond, keep your weapon trained on him and be ready to fire and cautiously start walking over to him. If the weapon's lying on the floor beside him, kick it away, still training your weapon on him at all times. If the weapon is still in his hand and he's not moving, step on the weapon so that he can't use it in case he's faking. Yell for someone to come over and take the weapon. If no one responds, kick it away. Now, if you wounded him and he fell to the floor and he still has the weapon in his hand and he starts to try and get up, yell for him to stay down. If he doesn't, shoot him again and again if necessary until he's totally neutralized. Remember, he's already shot at and probably killed other people. You don't want to be next. One word of caution. Be sure when you fire that there are no innocent bystanders in the line of fire. As long as you're aiming at him, do not use your cell phone to call 911. You're going to need both hands on your weapon. Yell for someone else to call 911 for you. Based on the history of active shooters, when bullets start coming at them, they become distracted and disoriented. Even if you shot him, or just wounded him, or even if you missed, sometimes a shooter will run away and in some cases commit suicide. There have been a few incidents where they put their hands in the air and give up. If they give up, tell them to put the weapon on the ground, clasp their hands behind their head, and then have them take 5 steps forward. Once he does this, tell him to get on his knees. Once they're on their knees, tell him to lay face down, spread his arms with his hands open and palms facing down. Always keep your weapon trained on him and wait for the police to arrive. Here's another thing to consider. You may be in a location where there's a lot of glass. If the shooter has his back to you, he may be able to see your reflection. If during the exchange of fire you expend all of your ammunition and the shooter is still active, you need to change tactics to run and hide and fight. Police officers are trained that in an active shooter event, not to hesitate and to only trust their fellow police officers. So, when they give you instructions, you need to do exactly what they say. They just arrived and they don't know who all the players are. The last thing that you want to be mistaken for is the active shooter. If you're an armed security officer and if the police arrive before you were able to holster your weapon, move the weapon to your side with your trigger finger along the barrel, or, even better, put put it on the floor, then stand up with your hands in the air so that the officers can see that you're not a threat. Keep in mind that just because you're wearing a security officer uniform and you're telling them that you're a security officer, that doesn't mean that they believe that. They don't know if you're telling the truth or if you're an active shooter dressed up like a security officer. Run and escape if possible. Getting away from the shooter is your top priority. Leave your belongings behind and just concentrate on getting away. Stay out of the line of fire and use concealment to your advantage. If possible, help others to escape. If some do not want to follow, don't waste time trying to convince them. Warn and prevent people from entering the area where the shooter is located. Hide if escape is not possible. Your hiding place should be out of the shooter's view and provide protection if shots are fired in your direction. Always try to get out of the shooter's view and stay very, very quiet. Silence all electronic devices, including their vibration capabilities. Lock and block doors, close the blinds, and turn off lights. Whenever possible, try not to hide in groups. Spread out along walls and hide separately to make it more difficult for the shooter. Try to communicate with the police silently. Use text messaging or social media to identify your location. Write and draw help signs and put them in the windows. Stay in place until law enforcement arrives and gives you the all clear. Fighting is your last resort. If you have to fight, then fight as aggressively as possible. Try to approach the shooter between his 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock zone. Use speed, surprise, and extreme violence when trying to neutralize a shooter. Deflect weapons towards a safe direction. Use strikes and the techniques to remove the weapon from the shooter's hands. Disable the attacker using any means necessary to avoid physical wrestling. Whenever possible, recruit others to ambush and swarm the shooter with makeshift weapons such as chairs, fire extinguishers, and any sharp instruments. When law enforcement arrive, keep your hands visible and empty. Police officers will be shouting commands and may push individuals to the ground for their own safety. Follow their instructions. You've now seen some of the defense tactics and response techniques regarding an active shooter attack. Remember, if it happens to you, and I surely hope it doesn't, it will not have the exact scenario as this training video. But if you rehearse your own scenarios at your post, you'll have a much better chance for survival. One final word of caution. Do not only rely on these techniques that you've seen. I highly recommend that you find special instructors that can give you a hands-on training regarding active shooter defense tactics. Always use your common sense for a path to safety. I sincerely hope that none of you watching this training video will ever be involved in an active shooter situation.